Major decision in the nation's capital today that supporters say will help Alaska's fishing industry. The Biden administration today slamming shut a loophole that was allowing banned Russian seafood from entering the U.S. market. Senator Dan Sullivan joins us now live in our studio to talk about this. And Senator, thanks so much for joining us this
Merry
evening.
Christmas, Mike. Great to be home.
So tell us briefly what was going on. How was Russian seafood that's been banned being funneled through other countries to get to us?
Well, we had this very unfair and economically damaging situation for about 10 years where Alaskan seafood, American seafood, was not allowed to be exported into any Russian market. Russia had banned exports into their country from America, but we were allowing Russian seafood into American markets. Very unfair. I've been working for years against that. After the invasion of Ukraine, the Biden administration put sanctions on Russian seafood imports in the United States. That was about a year and a half ago. That was great. It was something I worked with the Biden White House on doing to make this a much more fair situation. And then, as you mentioned, Mike, there was a huge loophole. They started taking hundreds of millions of dollars of Russian seafood, shipping it to China, transforming it, and then sending it almost duty-free into our market. So this was harming our fishing industry, fishermen, fishing communities. This executive order today shuts that loophole down. Any Russian caught fish in any Russian caught or any vessel catching fish from Russia cannot come into the United States, regardless if it goes to a third country. That's a huge deal, something I've been working on for the last 2 years, and it's a very welcome announcement and a long overdue win for our fishing communities and fishing industry.
All right, so Senator, how is this change going to help Alaska fishermen?
Well, look, as you know, Mike, we're the superpower of seafood. Almost over 2/3 of all seafood harvested in America comes from our state. So that's thousands and thousands of people, Alaskans, in the industry. One thing this is going to almost certainly do is going to help shore up prices. The Russians have been flooding global markets with salmon, with pollock, and prices have crashed. This is a really challenging time for our fishing industry, our fishing communities, and we think with this full ban on Russian imports in the United States, and they can't get around it now, we think that's going to help shore up prices. The European Union has done something very similar. So 2 of the biggest markets in the world will now be banning all Russian seafood. We think that's going to be a really important opportunity for our fishermen and hopefully stabilize prices.
Senator, along with the economics of all this, there's also a humanitarian component to this when it comes to slave labor that was allegedly being used to process this fish and cutting off money going to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Tell us about that briefly.
Exactly. You know, the oligarchs who are in charge of the Russian fishing industry were using a lot of their proceeds to help Putin fund his brutal war against Ukraine. So that helps cut off money for Putin's war machine. But you also mentioned there's been a lot of reporting on this in the last several weeks that the Chinese fishing industry, their processing industry, in many ways uses slave labor. The Uyghurs, the Muslim minority in China, has been pressed into this industry. So you have a human rights abuses, you have the Putin war machine. This is going to cut off all of that. Look, Alaskan fishermen shouldn't have to compete against these countries who, by the way, have the lowest environmental standards of any fishing industry in the world. Human rights abuses, slave labor. So again, this is a win on so many fronts, and I'm really glad it happened today.
Senator Dan Sullivan has been working on this for quite some time. Thanks for joining us this evening, and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Merry Christmas to you, Mike, as well, and to all Alaskans. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Senator.